Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to see about triggers in SQL Server. What are triggers? A trigger is a special kind of a stored procedure that executes in response to certain action on a table like insertion, deletion, or updating of data. So it's a special kind of a stored procedure. Suppose you insert some records, you delete some records, you update some records. You want to make sure that certain actions has to be triggered after of it, then you use triggers. It is a database object which is bound to a table and it is executed automatically. So you're not going to trigger it manually. It's not like create procedure, execute procedure. You're not going to do it anything. It will be automatically triggered. You cannot explicitly invoke triggers. The only way to do this is by performing the required action on the table that they are assigned to. Only if you do an insert or update or delete on a table, if trigger is associated to it, it will automatically trigger. You cannot test it manually. What are the types of triggers available in SQL Server? We have a DML triggers, DDL triggers, and logon triggers. So DML triggers is nothing but in response to insert, update, and delete, the trigger will be done. There will be DDL triggers and logon triggers. In this lecture, we are going to see how to create and use DML triggers in SQL Server. Let's look into how you create the DML triggers. Even in the DML triggers, there are two sections to it. One is after triggers and another one is instead of triggers. So what is after triggers? Suppose after you do an insert, update or delete on a table, you want to trigger something. They are called as after triggers. They are not supported for views, only it will be supported for tables. What is instead of trigger? This can be used as an interceptor for anything that anyone try to do on a table or view. Suppose you want to delete a record on a table. Before you delete a record, you want to intercept these things and make sure that on a certain conditions met only, you are allowing them to delete it. So we are intercepting the input or the queries and figuring out whether we can allow it or not. It is called instead of triggers. So the DML triggers are further classified into after triggers and instead of triggers. So this is the syntax of it. I kept it on the left hand side, where we are going to create two tables. The two tables are employee table, which contains the employee information, and then we are going to create an audit table. So whenever there is an insert, update, delete happens, we are pushing the record to the audit table using triggers. So employee table, whenever insert happens, triggers can push the data back to the audit table for audits. Let's look into the syntax. So create trigger. You're going to create the trigger with the trigger name on the database, or the database or the table you want to create it. So create trigger name on the table. For what purpose you're creating? For insert. So you yourself are mentioning that it is for insert. I'm doing this trigger. So you can do update, you can do delete like that. So we are creating some variables: employee ID, employee name, salary, and audit action. So we are declaring those variables, the first four lines. How do you retrieve the values? Suppose you are inserting into your table. How do you know which record got inserted? This is captured in an inserted table. It is a standard table for triggers. So whenever you enable a trigger, you are inserting onto the base table employee test. What will happen is a copy, whatever got inserted, goes into this inserted table. So it is kind of a temporary table. You can imagine that it is not applicable. You are not creating this. SQL Server maintains this. From the inserted table, we are retrieving the employee ID, employee name, employee salary, and the inserted record. Again, this inserted record is not coming from the inserted table. This is an audit action. So you're telling that action, what action has happened. It is an inserted record and it is a string, and you are capturing in the single quotes. That is captured after using insert trigger. So what we have done is we created four variables for holding the data that has been that we need to insert into the audit table. We are taking from the inserted table, which is being inserted automatically whenever insert happens to an employee test, and taking those records into the audit table. Now, next action is what you are going to do is insert into the employee audit test table. These are the columns present in this table, and the values are employee ID, employee name, employee salary, the audit action, that is the string we given, and the get date with the current date time when it got updated. So you've done two things. You've taken it from inserted and pushed it to test audit when you are inserting some records inside employee test table. Then you are saying that print after insert trigger file. Let's look into the demo straight away. So I've already created this table, employee test, and I've also inserted some records. Now I'm going to create this trigger. I also created this employee test audit table. I'm planning to create this trigger after insert on employee for insert. So I'm saying that it is for insert, and this is an after trigger. So I'm the same code, whatever I walked through in the PPT, is the same code present. So I'm using from inserted, I'm picking up employee ID, employee name, and employee salary. And those values I'm assigning to a variable. For audit action, I'm having a variable. Then these variables are inserted into the test table. Let me create this trigger first. The trigger got created successfully. Now I will insert a new record inside this employee test table. Before that, if employee test table, probably I'm trying to delete records if anything is present in the employee test audit table. So let me go back and delete it. Since I might have tested it using this table, just want to make sure that I delete this table. So query got executed successfully. I want to pull it up. Yeah, one row was there, it got deleted. Now I've created the trigger. Let me insert into this table. Now I am inserting into the main table employee test. I am not inserting into the audit table. If you see the audit table, I've deleted it already, so there are no rows present. I never did anything on the audit table. Now I'm going to insert in this new table. What would have happened here is after insert triggered and it inserted into the audit table and also inserted into the employees table. Now let me select and see what is that in audit table now. So you see this, there is a new record inserted, whatever we are given, 7 employee ID Chris, employee salary is this, audit action is this, and audit timestamp is this. In the timestamp, we are given the get date to get the latest date or current date. Now, we are going to create an update trigger. The syntax is same except you're seeing that insert replaced by update. And one thing you noticed, so there is an inserted in the insert, but for update, we don't have an update. So in update, what it does is internal SQL Server, it deletes some records and inserts the records while updating it. So we are picking it from the inserted table only. So keep that in mind. For update, there is no specific update table, and you are picking up the records from the insert table only. So let me create this trigger. The trigger got created successfully. I'm going to update this table. Table got updated. Let me go back and select from the table. You could see that there is an updated record has been happened. So we are able to update, we are able to trigger and using the triggers. Now you can do the delete also same except while creating there you're mentioning after delete. So it's after trigger. You're saying it is after delete, you're going to do some actions. So I'm not going to execute this delete trigger because it is going to do the same action whatever we have done. Whatever functionality we have done it, we are going to get it. So we don't want to test it out. In the delete also, in the trigger, I'm inserting into the test audit whether an action has happened or not. Now, so we have done this after triggers. Whenever an action has happened, an activity has happened, a row has been inserted into the audit table. Now, we go into the instead of triggers now. Instead of triggers, if you see here, the syntax is we are mentioning as instead of. So that is meaning it is a instead of trigger. Other than that, syntax remains the same. Create trigger on this, and it is mentioned as instead of delete. So whenever a delete action is happening, instead of delete action, you want to do some actions. What we have done in the syntax is, again, we have a deleted table. So update doesn't have an update table. Update picks up on the inserted table. But for deleted, we have a deleted table. We're going to pick up the employee ID, employee name, and the employee salary. Now we have a condition here. If the employee salary is greater than 1,200, you don't allow them to delete those records. And that's it. So you're saying the rollback. I don't want to allow it. Yes, you allow them to delete those records, and you take it from the deleted, and then you're going back, deleting from the table, actual table, and then you're committing those, and then you are inserting into the audit table as well. So you're doing two things. But having a if else condition, if employee salary is greater than 1200, don't allow them to delete. If it is less than 200, you allow them to delete it and insert one row inside the audit table. Let's test it out. For employee ID 4, the salary is greater than 1200. If you go back to the records what we have inserted, you see that for the employee ID 4, it is an auto-generated column. The salary is 1000 greater than 1200. Let me try to delete it. So as per the instead of trigger, you should not allow to delete it. Okay, why it allowed to delete it? Because we didn't create the trigger at all. So let's go back and create it. Now we have deleted it. So let's go back to the employee ID 5 and then execute this one. It says that you cannot delete this where salary is greater than 1200. So if we go back and allow it 3, it goes to the else block of this instead of trigger. It deleted it and then it pushes an entry to the audit table. So let's go back to the audit table and see what happened. So we just verifying the audit table. Here you see that there is an entry present deleted off instead of delete trigger. So in this lecture, we have seen how to use instead of triggers and after triggers. And we have also recorded some rows inside the audit table based on the triggering action.